Welcome back to the Pro Wrestling Push Me poll for February 1990. This is a ranking system based on who the biggest names in wrestling were in any given month, who was getting the biggest push in terms of big matches wrestled and championships held. So February 1990 was a hugely busy month for wrestling across the board, and we've got wrestlers from each of the top four promotions sitting inside the top six as this month's A-plus players. Number one for February remained Hulk Hogan, the WWF World Champion, and still the unquestioned biggest star in the business. The Hogan vs. Ultimate Warrior Ultimate Challenge match for WrestleMania 6 was made official off the back of their interactions last month at the big Royal Rumble and Saturday night's main event shows, with Hogan actually being the one to issue the challenge as World Champion to Ultimate Warrior, who's ranked number 3 this month as the secondary Intercontinental Champion, to prove which one of them was the bigger and better man. But before we went all in on the build to that, the big show for the WWF this month was the Main Event 3 NBC TV special in front of a big crowd in Detroit, which featured two big televised marquee matches. Hogan defending the WWF World title one last time against former champion Macho King Randy Savage, who features at number 10 this month, and Warrior defending his Intercontinental title against Dino Bravo. But that show, of course, all came down to continuing the hype for Hogan Warrior at WrestleMania 6, scheduled for the 1st of April. After Hogan saw off Savage in a decent match with boxer Buster Douglas as the guest referee, Douglas had shockingly beat the originally advertised guest referee Mike Tyson for the undisputed boxing heavyweight title at the start of the month. And then Warrior retained the IC title against Bravo. The big post-match angle kicked in. So Bravo and his huge new ally, the Earthquake, attacked and double-teamed Warrior until Hogan, being everyone's hero, ran in to make the save. Warrior doesn't take kindly to being rescued by Hogan, gets in Hogan's face, and the two go head-to-head just as they did at Royal Rumble and Saturday night's main event last month, as referees swarm into the ring and try to stop them fighting because order WrestleMania 6, everyone. It was still great stuff though, and the WWF was building the top match for Mania up really, really well. Number 2 this month is the veteran New Japan tag team of Antonio Inoki and Seiji Sakaguchi, who, for the benefit of those less familiar with Japanese Puro, are basically the founder and deputy, the dads of New Japan, essentially. Inoki and Sakaguchi main evented and won the top match of the huge Super Fight in Tokyo Dome show this month, the second biggest wrestling card of the year globally, just behind WrestleMania, in front of almost 64,000 fans. Beating the young team of Shinya Hashimoto and Masahiro Chono, ranked number 7 this month. But let me first explain what was going on in New Japan at the time, because this was really a huge month for the company, and they re-established their slightly shaky standing in the Japanese market a ton with this Tokyo Dome show. A bit of context for this: there was a lot going on in Japanese wrestling at this time. Basically, New Japan and All Japan, the country's two big established promotions, had both got pretty spooked by the rapid rise of Akira Maeda's UWF newborn Rebel promotion during 1989, not least because the UWF had sold out the Tokyo Dome with a massive crowd of 60,000 just a few months previously with their reality, strike-based, shoot-fighting style of pro wrestling, a crowd that dwarfed what New Japan itself had drawn to the Tokyo Dome for their big show of 1989. So Antonio Inoki, the founder and owner of New Japan, who is incidentally semi-retired and a member of the Japanese parliament at this point, was absolutely determined to reassert his company's dominance in Japan by promoting nothing less than the biggest show ever seen in Japan, by bringing in the top wrestlers from all over the world, in particular America and the Soviet Union. He had wanted the WWF, NWA, and AWA world titles all defended on this one big Tokyo Dome show. But talks with the WWF never really got anywhere, although Hogan would eventually headline a combined New Japan All Japan show just 2 months later. But the NWA and AWA world titles were booked, and NWA World Champion Ric Flair was scheduled and advertised to defend the NWA title against the Great Muta at the Tokyo Dome. But for whatever reason, TBS or the NWA balked and apparently threatened to dock Flair's pay if he made the trip. So that got pulled, and depending on who you believe, was one of a number of many factors that contributed to Ric Flair quitting the WCW booking committee in anger later this month. Anyway, Inoki was in a bind because Flair had been promoted for the show, so he made a huge call, pivoted, and had his right-hand man Sakaguchi reach out to their great rivals, All Japan Pro Wrestling, to step in and save the show by turning it into the first co-promoted New Japan/All Japan card for over a decade. And the move was a masterstroke. The announcement of New Japan and All Japan working together sold all remaining tickets, and at 63,900 was the biggest wrestling show ever staged in Japan at that point in time. So, yeah, Inoki and Sakaguchi beat Hashimoto and Chono in a generational clash in the main event, refereed by arguably the greatest wrestler of all time, Lou Thesz, who was in his 70s at this point. The second biggest match on the Tokyo Dome card saw New Japan's imposing foreign monster heel and reigning IWGP champion Big Van Vader, in at number 5 on this month's poll, taking on All Japan's resident tough man Gaijin Stan Hansen, in at number 6, in what became one of the most infamously brutal matches of all time. Originally, this was to have been Vader versus Riki Choshu before the All Japan collaboration shook up the whole card, but what we got instead was New Japan's biggest, toughest, meanest American versus All Japan's biggest, toughest, meanest American, and these two, determined to make their respective companies look good, just beat the living shit out of each other for a quarter of an hour, including, famously, Vader's eyeball getting knocked out of its socket and Vader just pushing it back in and continuing stiffing the shit out of each other until they just brawled to a double countout. The match was insanity and clearly should have been stopped after Vader's eye injury, but it absolutely solidified Vader's legend in Japan and continued to cement Stan Hansen's as well. In the third top match at the Tokyo Dome, New Japan veteran Masa Saito upset Larry Zbyszko to win the AWA World title in what was a pretty shocking result at the time, and honestly quite a surprisingly good match. So Saito comes in at number 9 this month, but the increased exposure provided by the title change would not be enough to stop the AWA going out of business shortly after this. Finally, for the NWA this month, number 4 in February, in the February top 10 was Ric Flair, the NWA World Champion. NWA/WCW basically went into a bit of a meltdown this month, so let's go through their February chronologically and try to make sense of it all. At the Clash of the Champions 10 TV special at the start of the month, the original 3 of the 4 horsemen, so Ric Flair and the Anderson brothers, Arn and Ole, who are ranked number 8 this month, turned heel on their 4th member, Sting. Flair, Ole and Arn kicked Sting out of the group at Clash 10 for refusing to give up his title shot against Flair at Wrestle War later this month, and turned themselves heel again in the process. Flair and the Andersons went on to beat the Great Muta, Buzz Sawyer and Dragon Master in the 6-man main event cage match of that show, with Sting trying to get into the cage and attack the Horsemen throughout. But Sting accidentally injured his knee on the cage, which utterly screwed up the company's plans to have Flair drop the NWA World title to Sting and usher in a bold new era for the promotion at Wrestle War at the end of the month. They rapidly pivoted to having Flair face the US champion Lex Luger at Wrestle War instead of Sting, who was rapidly turned face again out of expedience despite being in the middle of a great heel run himself. And again, depending on who you believe, TBS executive Jim Herd just wanted Flair to drop the belt to Luger instead, but Flair refused, saying he'd promised the belt to Sting, and as mentioned, ended up resigning from the WCW booking committee in protest over Herd's ongoing interference. In the end, at Wrestle War, they did an angle where Sting, on crutches, came down to ringside to cheer on Luger, got jumped by the Andersons, and Luger, who had Flair up in his torture rack finisher, gave up the chance to finally become champion in order to save Sting and got counted out, keeping the belt on Flair for now. Flair v Luger at Wrestle War was a really good match for what it's worth, but these were not happy days in the NWA. So yeah, that's your Pro Wrestling Push Me Pull top 10 for February 1990. Lots going on this month. Bubbling under this month's top 10, in the WWF, we've already mentioned Dino Bravo and Earthquake running roughshod over people. Mr. Perfect and the Genius were continuing to be a thorn in the side for both Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake on the house show circuit. Jake Roberts and Ted DiBiase continued to feud. Roddy Piper wound up his program against Rick Rude and was beginning a new one against Bad News Brown. The Colossal Connection of Andre the Giant and Haku remained the tag team champions, and the Rockers and Powers of Pain continued to feud as well. Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Tito Santana were both kept strong as faces in the WWF. For New Japan, pretty much everyone on the Superfight in Tokyo Dome undercard racked up good points because of how big the crowd was. So Koji Kitao, who's a former sumo star making his pro wrestling debut, beat Bam Bam Bigelow. All Japan's Genichiro Tenryu and Tiger Mask beat New Japan's Riki Choshu and George Nakano. All Japan Triple Crown champion Jumbo Tsuruta teamed with Yoshiaki Yatsu to beat New Japan's Kengo Kimura and Osamu Kido. In two USA versus USSR matches, Steve Williams beat Salman Hashimikov and Brad Rengens beat Victor Zangief, and elsewhere, the Blonde Bombers beat Hiroshi Hase, Kuniaki Kobayashi and Kantaro Hoshino. Naoki Sano and Pegasus Kid, which was Chris Benoit under a mask, beat junior heavyweight champion Jushin Thunder Liger and Akira Nogami, and in the opening bout, Takayuki Iizuka beat Osamu Matsuda. Bubbling under for the NWA, Super Sub US champion Lex Luger was just outside the top 10, and the Steiner brothers Rick and Scott remained the NWA World Tag Team Champions. And finally, in the US territories, Jerry Lawler remained the USWA champion in Memphis and Dallas, with Jeff Jarrett being booked strongly as well. And Curtis Thompson, the future Firebreaker Chip, won the Pacific Northwest title from Scotty the Body in Portland. In Mexico's UWA, El Canek was top Rudo, Dos Caras and Pero Agallo the top Technicos. So it was a breathless month. One final thing. I know I said last time this channel is about Push, who was being featured in the biggest matches for that particular month, who was objectively at the top of the business, not match quality. Then I talked last time about how awesome Jushin Liger versus Naoki Sano was. This month I'm just very briefly mentioning my favourite match of the month, which is the Rock and Roll Express versus the Midnight Express from NWA Wrestle War 90. The Rock and Roll Express, one of the biggest teams of the 80s, were back in the NWA, after having spent the last year or so bouncing around between the AWA Memphis and Japan, and they'd wasted no time renewing their old rivalry with the Midnight Express. These teams knew each other so well, and this match at Wrestle War was just a ton of fun. 5 absolute masters of their craft: Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson, Stan Lane, Bobby Eaton, and Jim Cornette as the Midnight's manager. Just having a blast, playing their roles to perfection and reminding us that wrestling, and tag team wrestling in particular, can be fun as hell, and skillful athleticism, and theatre at its best. It's just a great, great match, and impossible not to watch with a smile on your face, and I'll try to find a link to it to pop it in the description. Okay, now we're done. I just really wanted to shout that match out. Right. Thanks for listening. Please do like, subscribe. This is a new channel, so your support's really appreciated. And hopefully see you next time for March 1990, which was the calm before the storm that was April. Cheers.